Welcome to Tone Talks. Welcome to Tone Talks. Welcome to Tone Talks.
How's everybody doing today? This is Antonio Moore. I wanted to have a brief discussion about Tracee Ellis Ross' new show, Mixedish, and essentially give my view on why we have such an issue with race and why reparations never got talked about because everybody tries to confuse race in their own interest. Let's talk about it. So there's a new show comes out, I guess, Tuesday with Tracy Silverstein, Tracee Ellis Ross, that's her name now, essentially playing the helm role or helping produce it about the story and narrative of biracial people in America. Now, fundamentally, what I will say is one of the conundrums is we all are mixed race in some way, meaning ADOS, American descendants of slavery, due to how slavery was actually processed and used in this country. But more specifically, she's talking about people that have a black parent and a white parent. One of the issues that I see already from the show is it tries to recreate a narrative of race in America as a Hatfields and McCoy's experience. It puts black people on one side and white people on one side and these biracials in the middle as victims of judgment. But what it fails to do is deal with the fact that no, black folks are undercast. One of the things that the Tone Talks program, along with the overall discussion about American descendants of slavery, has been able to bring about as a narrative that's driven by economics and data rather than just social judgment. So fundamentally, one of the issues we've continuously seen is this idea that no one has a right to police blackness. Well, the data tells us what blackness is. And fundamentally, what you start to see when you understand the data is that there's been a con plague. So let me explain what I mean. White America, as I've shown prior, has 90% of the national wealth. Black America has 2.6. There's $107 trillion in household wealth. White America has about 100 trillion of it. We as a race are 14% of the population, and we control only $3 trillion in wealth, largely calcified in the top 10% of our families, 2.25 trillion in the top 2 million of our families. There's 20 million black families. White America is 83 million homes. The top 8 million have 75 trillion. Essentially, the bottom 90% of their race, after the top 10%, they still have $25 trillion. So fundamentally, what you see is a narrative that was driven by the cost of being locked out in America, a narrative that was driven by black folks in America being shut out of opportunity and access because they descend from slavery, not just because they're brown and they were here in 1950 and 1940 and 1930 and 1900 and 1880. And I think one of the things that we start to see is that everybody wants to believe in a false narrative that what the one drop rule did then, it still does now, and it doesn't. What we see now is a transition from what I believe was the one drop rule to more of a lineage loophole model. When I say lineage loopholes, they're extreme aberrations that allow America to cover itself in this narrative of the aberrational story rather than confront the realities of race and its consequence on black folks, on ADOS folks in this country. So let's look at it. Let's be more specific. What you start to see is that when you look at wealth by deciles, essentially Matt Brunig did the initial chart and I adjusted it, and what it shows is black wealth by deciles and white wealth by deciles. So you can see each 10% how much wealth they hold out of their group share. Well, fundamentally, what happens if you have one white parent, a la Jordan Peele, Barack Obama, Tracy Silverstein, Nicole Jones from the New York Times, is you get to play into the great white wealth pool. Now, if that white parent is college educated or relatively privileged, you're probably in the top 20% or 30% of that white pool, which essentially means that you have the access to white privilege. But then you're able to be countered against black folks that are summarily locked out of wealth, particularly those black folks in the bottom 90%, but really the whole race. So you as a narrative inherit all of the privilege through one white parent that somebody would inherit through two, and essentially as a result play the role of a lineage loophole, and then now you want to project yourself as a normalcy. Your projection is the reason why we can't get reparations. Your presence is the reason why we don't talk about reparations, because you present a false narrative of progress that America doesn't deserve or didn't create. What you actually see is that these biracials, and this is about the data, when you look at it, they reflect the access you get when you can access and touch white privilege. Let me be more specific. Barack Obama inherited $500,000 from his white grandmother. We know this. Washington Post reported on it when she passed away. Throughout life, he received gifts along the way that that basically connected him to the same level of wealth. He lived in a $1 million home in Hawaii with his grandparents. He went to an elite high school his grandparents largely paid for. He was essentially white in every point of access until it came time to run for office, in which case he was presented as African American. Now, there's a larger whole discussion about him being Kenyan versus African American, but just for the specific purposes of dealing with this specific issue, one of the things that I see as a problem is a severe lack of understanding of the data, and because you don't understand the data, you don't understand race in America. If you have a parent that allows you all of the privileges and the access of touching and accessing the wealth that white folks hoard in their group, I don't understand how then you get to say I'm Mixedish or I'm mixed. I don't understand how you get detached from white privilege, nor do I understand how you get attached to black struggle, and as a result of people having stories like mine, we get shut out. And this is the large narrative. My story is the narrative of America. Black America largely is segregated from white America across this country. When you look at it according to the racial dot map, I'm scrolling up now, the blue dots are white, and you can see the green dots are black. Black people are concentrated throughout the South and Midwest with sprinkles, say in LA or New York, the big cities. White people are all across this country. And I don't think we all want to get honest about the reflection of what that means when an individual comes out of that situation and then wants to talk about blackness. But let's get more specific. You know, like as an example, Nicole Jones wrote the 1619 Project. I recommend you to go read it. But my problem now is that you don't want to talk about reparations. You don't want to talk about the Civil Rights Act of 1866. You don't want to do any of the actual substantive work to change the condition of black folks that live like me. Let me explain. My parents came from, my mama and my daddy had me at 16, going on 17. My mama come from Mississippi and my daddy come from Alabama. Neither one of them knew their fathers really well at all. I really don't even know my grandfathers. Essentially, I am locked out of intergenerational wealth in America. What I see as a result of these other people, say Nicole Jones is an example, is they get to say we about the struggle and the cost that people like me, massive numbers, not just the majority, damn near all of black America lives through. But then they get to access the same white privilege that they complain about. So you say, white people have redlining and oppression. Well, if that is your mother or your grandfather, I don't understand how you get to say we. You actually are going to inherit wealth that came from redlining and oppression. And I think that if you're not, you should tell your specific story as part of the whole narrative. Otherwise, it's just presumed that you're going to be a white privilege receiver. And so I fundamentally come back to the discussion of Mixedish. I have no idea why this is on the air. I look back to Shannon Dungy, and Shannon Dungy specifically said when it came to like black TV, she was doing wish fulfillment. This is the former executive at ABC that gave us both Blackish and Roseanne. Now understand, with Roseanne, she was willing to display the real narrative of what white folks was living like. Roseanne's house was worth about $130,000, and they lived in it, and it's still worth $130,000 when you do the Zillow for it, the actual valuation. Whereas with Blackish, you have this ad executive and this doctor living in a $2 million home with 3 kids going to private school, and none of the numbers make sense. Because fundamentally, what you end up with is a life that will require you to have millions of dollars when we know by the data. And again, this is the fundamental, this is the answer that Tone Talks Project presents to America. It stops talking about it in a general sense and it starts talking about it in reality. There are 20 million black homes. 20 million. To be in the top 10%, the one that that has all of our wealth, all you need to do is be worth like $160,000, $170,000 hard. The middle black family in America is worth $1,700 without depreciating assets. Understand that in Boston they have $8 liquid. This is according to the Color Wealth Report. They did different cities. Federal Reserve did this along with Professor Sandy Darity and other economists. In Miami, the middle native black family has $11 liquid. In LA, the middle native black family has $200 liquid. What you end up with the narrative of, to be in the top 5% of black families, I think that's around 700,000 black families. All you need is about $350,000 hard. Understand how low a threshold that is. That might be top 30% for white families. Understand that only a few 100,000 black families have about 340,000 are worth more than $1 million hard, a single $1 million hard. So you don't understand that when they show Blackish, they're showing a family that isn't in the likely, can't exist on the salary levels that those people are actually making. They would have to inherit that home. But in addition, what they're showing is a family that, even if it did exist, is in the top 0.5, 0.3% of Black America, and saying that that's the story we want to tell. Now we want to tell the offspring of that story and tell the biracial part of it. What you fundamentally deal with is, that's why we can't deal with and talk about reparations, because white America is getting its narrative of black life from people who don't know what the hell they talking about when it comes to black life. I'm not guessing. I'm doing it from the numbers from the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances. I don't know what Kenya Burris is using. I don't know what the young woman that Gist, I believe, that created Mixedish is doing from. It feels like a bunch of feel-good stories. They got Mariah Carey singing this weird anthem about being biracial and how that, and, you know, and the judgment that comes from it is in the actual trailer. And it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. You making yourself a victim of black people that are actually struggling with the cost of being ADOS when you actually have a white parent and can inherit all the wealth from them. None of that makes sense. I think what we have to understand is the danger of this show. The danger of telling these narratives and not saying the whole story. The danger of letting Nicole Jones write the 1619 Project, but not demanding that she writes about the Civil Rights Act of 1866 as part of the project. Because that is the work, to demand reparations. And I'm not talking about the kind of reparations that are in H.R. 40. See, I'm talking about the kind of reparations that demand a release of $500 billion to $1 trillion at execution. Not just a study. We can study it, but I need good faith money in the front end as well. And I think as I start to look at this thing, I have to look at it through specific examples. Let's start off with Barack Obama. Barack Obama, born to a Kenyan and a white mother, both highly educated, essentially lived with the white grandparents in Hawaii. He does this all at the same time as my father lives in LA with just his mama from Alabama. And I say this to you because crack was scourged in LA. I did the documentary I was nominated for an Emmy on, Freeway Crack in the System, where we talked about how while Barack Obama was in Hawaii, black America was on fire. Understand what it means, because Barack and my father are the same age, what it means to miss all that. To miss all of the crack era, not come from American slavery, and be able to come over to America and run as the answer to race. Understand, we look at Jordan Peele. Jordan Peele's more like my age. He didn't know his black father all that well from the New York Times and other reports. He largely was raised by a single white mother. I have no idea how somebody raised by a single white mother was able to create the Key and Peele show, which largely was a racist show. It made a lot of racialized, judgmental, bad statements about what black life is. And the only reason he was allowed to do it is because of his skin color. But he doesn't have the background to even understand what he's talking about. I'm saying this to you because what we see right now is America wants to answer this whole tragedy of American slavery with biracials, with West African immigrants, with Caribbeans. It does not want to answer this with reparations. And part of the problem with Mixedish is it goes on the air right in the middle of a major national discussion about what race is. It creates a narrative built on a sad misconstruing of what the cost is. It's not about you walking into a lunch cafeteria and black people looking at you one way and white people looking. It's about black folks in this country chained to the bottom because they were made to be the bottom, from slavery to peonage to mass incarceration. I don't understand this thing. I look over at Tracy Ellis Ross, who was born Tracy Silverstein. She lived the privileges of being Jewish. I don't have no issue with being Jewish, but if that's what you are, that's what you gotta live. You don't get to change your name to Tracy Ellis Ross to tap into being black later on in life and then try to tell the narratives of little black girls all across this country that don't live with a white Jewish father. You don't get to put him in the box and then bring him out now finally and show him a lot. I'm saying to you, fundamentally, what America's trying to do is cover itself in a false narrative of what America is and was. You can let that happen. You can let America create false narratives from all kind of different angles. Right now we're talking about biracials, or you can confront the reality that when we look at the data, it tells us the truth. That when you have two ADOS parents, American descendant of slavery parents, you are summarily, very often locked out of wealth and access in this country, and that becomes because of slavery. You can deal with the fact that they need to take those people, repair them, and make them wholly American. Now, that you don't do that by taking aberrations or lineage loopholes. People who are a loophole through a lineage, kind of like aberrational story that they had. I don't care if it's a West African that came over here in 1993, or their parents came in 93 and came with them. I don't care if it's a biracial like Tracy Silverstein or Jordan Peele, who essentially by life lived pretty much as a white person with all the white privilege that comes with. Now somebody would say, well, they deal with judgment and discrimination the same way. And I would argue you need to come to LA and live here. If you have wealth and a white parent, I would argue that you largely live a white life. Now I'm not saying you don't randomly deal with somebody calling you a racial epithet and something of the sort. I'm saying day to day, the kind of things that I dealt with, that I lived, that I seen other people live, you don't live that. Tracy Ellis Ross didn't live that. I believe she grew up in Beverly Hills. I'm going to tell you right now, Jordan Peele didn't live that. He went to a $40,000 private school in Manhattan. That was his story. My single black mama was sending me to a regular public school. Understand that. I'm saying this to you because there's a cost now of being locked out, being connected to ADOS fully. See, what we used to have is the one drop rule. One drop of blackness made you contaminated socially. I don't agree with that. That's the way it was. We believe that still exists today, and that is the lane or the avenue that Tracy Ellis Ross, Barack Obama, Jordan Peele are using to allow them to access a black life they didn't live. So, what do I mean? Now we live by a lineage loophole model. So effectively, if you have one white parent, you inherit the wealth, the privilege, the access that you would inherit with two. Whether it be Meghan Markle as another example, with the white father that she lived with. She lived with the man that was doing movie work and spent his money and went to the same restaurants and everything else that any white sister would go to. That's what America is. Obama did the same thing. I don't understand how we got here where we allow these people who are extreme aberrations to cover up the fact that America don't want to deal with black folks no more. I wanted to come to you because I think in a lot of ways we got to get honest. We got to get honest when people benefit from redlining and then tell us about how redlining cost America. We don't know if Barack Obama's grandma, who was a VP at a bank in Hawaii, that bank was tied into redlining because it was an American bank, and that's what he inherited. We should be demanding those answers. But because we don't understand race beyond looking like black folks, we don't understand what to ask. ADOS changes all of that. And that's why everybody's so shook up about it. Because ADOS forces this nation to look at itself and to deal with itself in a way that it has never dealt with itself. Not only does ADOS talk about reparations and a black agenda, but it talks about an identity evaluation that looks at America through the hundreds and hundreds of years of slavery, peonage, and the like that it actually created in its history. I just wanted to talk about this because I had no idea why Mixedish is on TV. I didn't understand why Blackish was, and I really don't understand why Mixedish is, because the reality is across this country, black folks is locked out. They ain't mixed in with none of the wealth and none of the access. I wanted to come to you because this is Tone Talks, and I had to come after I keep on coming through my Twitter thread and seeing this Mixedish. Let's just talk about it. Y'all can be in the comments, give your opinions. Again, you can talk about policing blackness, but make sure you answer to that data first. Because the data is policing blackness, and it's telling you those people who have ADOS parents, unlike people who have one parent who's ADOS, are summarily, largely locked out of America. Thank you.